Hi, everyone. Kai Weiss here from the Austrian Economics Center. I'm based in Germany. Today, throughout the next hour or so, we will discuss the topic of Austrian economics, a European perspective. We have four great panelists with us today to discuss kind of what are the main challenges that Europe will face today, which are the ones that will lie ahead in the future. Also, what can Latin America, I know our audience is more from that continent, what can they learn from Europe? What can Europe learn from Latin America? And what is the role, of course, of Austrian economics in all of this? How can Austrian economics help us in tackling the big issues of our day? I will lead us through the discussion, but I'm only the moderator, so our four panelists are the stars. They are from all across Europe. They are from Central Europe, so we have someone from Austria. They are from Sweden. They are from Bulgaria, and they're also from tiny, but probably for Austrian economics, from the Austrian standpoint, quite important and quite illuminating, Liechtenstein. This is supposed to be a free-flowing discussion, so there will be no presentations. It will only be a discussion if you want. But you can also be a part of it, and I would highly encourage you to ask any questions that you might have for our panelists. Someone will then send it to me and I will try to fit it. So our four panelists, I'll just very quickly introduce them to you as I see them on the screen. I hope you see them in the same way. On the top left, you have Anders Edstedt, who is from Sweden. He's an advisor at Scantech Strategy Advisors, which advises major Swedish industry and business organizations. And he's also the chairman of Svensk Tidskrift, which is a weekly magazine focusing on politics, economics, and culture, and was founded in 1911 and is published in Swedish. Down below, you have Barbara Kolm, who is the vice president of the Austrian Central Bank and is also the director of the Austrian Economics Center, as well as the president of the Friedrich August von Hayek Institute. And in that sense, also not just once, but twice my boss. So I think I have to be careful today with what questions I will ask her. Then we have on the right to me, on the right side, Krasen Stanchev, who is a professor at Sofia University in Bulgaria. He's also a board chairman, founder, and former executive director of IME, which is Bulgaria's first free market think tank. He's also a former member and committee chairman of Bulgaria's Constitutional Assembly. He was there from 1990 to 1991 and was one of the drafters of reforms leading Bulgaria from central planning to a market economy. And finally, on the bottom right, we have Prince Michael of Liechtenstein, who is joining us, not overly surprisingly, I suppose, from Liechtenstein. He is the founder and chairman of Geopolitical Information Service, as well as the president of a think tank called ECAEF, which is short for European Center of Austrian Economics Foundation. Thanks everyone for joining us, all the panelists. Thanks for spending the next hour with our audience. I wanted to start this discussion with very open questions to all of you, but I was trying to kind of figure out what is the situation in Europe, what are the main challenges lying ahead. And I wanted to start with Prince Michael, asking him, as sort of, he's the only one in this panel who is not living in an EU member state. And I was just wondering if he can give us, as sort of a semi-outsider, a look at what Europe is going through right now, what the EU is going through right now. What are the main challenges? How is it looking like?
Well, I would say that thank you, but I would say I'm maybe not a semi-outsider, but a semi-outsider. We in Liechtenstein, we are members of the European Economic Area, which is Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein being very closely associated with the European Union. But it's true, we are part of the internal market, but we are not part of the political union. Now, if I look at the situation of the European Union, you know, I was always a big promoter of the European integration. I thought that it was very important. I thought lots of things were done. It's a very important project, a very successful one, if we want. But there are at the moment, I think the European Union and the European institutions have since a while a problem to deal with certain issues. And one of the issues is that there is, I think, a too high wish to harmonize. And this wish to harmonize is not only coming from the institutions of the European Union, it also comes from quite a number of the national states who want to actually to transfer certain responsibilities up to the union level. But the union is part of this, accepting these things instead of saying, let's keep it small, let's do the national state what the really national states can do, let's do the region which the regions can do, and let's only get to the union level what only the union level can do. So this is, I would say there's a problem of centralization, but we have this problem also inside the national states. And I think lately we have the issue that we are moving from a decentralized democracy rather towards a centralized administration bureaucracy. So this is one of the big concerns. The other concern I have is really in the financial matters and actually the excessive spending, public spending. We have it already since years, and now COVID is a wonderful excuse, so and give liquidity in the economy. This excessive way, I think, is very concerning. And you know, this decision by the European Council, by the heads of state and government of yesterday, that every debt ceiling is given up and countries can spend as much as they want, and as the result will be, the deficit will be taken up by the European Central Bank, I think is extremely dangerous for the long-term view of the economy and the society. I think that the way is open to high inflation.
Thanks for that. I'll get very quickly in a second to Anders to ask him about centralization and harmonization. But for the moment, I was wondering if Barbara could jump in on the second issue of public spending, of the recovery fund, as it is called, and if she could just explain quickly what the situation is on that. And also, of course, you not only being an expert on finance, but also on monetary issues, is there something which we as sort of Austrian-minded, I mean Austrian economics, when I say Austrian-minded people should be worried about today?
Well, thank you, Kai, for those questions, and thank you, Prince Michael, for leading us into the topic. Let me add one more thing. One term that we have completely forgotten is subsidiarity. Prince Michael circumvented it, but I think we have to also always keep that in mind, especially as Austrian economists. The subsidiarity principle should be dear to us. And then, of course, the second thing would be the rule of law. The rule of law is the basis for Europe, and we probably have left the rule of law when we first broke the Maastricht criteria already. Back then, long time ago, when Germany ran their first deficits and did not meet the Maastricht criteria, which are the 60% of GDP, etc. We all know that. And then now with the COVID crisis, we have completely forgotten about all the rules that we have imposed on ourselves as the EU, and or as group of nations, of states who we have commonly agreed to when everybody joined the European Union. And then we started breaking those rules. And having said that, I will come to your question directly, both on the ECB and on the EU level with the Next Generation Fund, the 750 billion that are out in the market right now, or that will be pushed into the system very soon, leveraged actually. And on the other hand, we have had the ECB right at the beginning of the crisis throwing in their weight into the system as well, with exactly the same amount of 750 billion of the so-called recovery fund, COVID recovery fund. We have now a tremendous amount of money in the system. Question is, can we, how long will this last? We are in a period of very low interest rates, or zero interest rates, actually, some parts even negative. Can we survive that? There have been answers by the Austrian school, by various economists, not only those long dead, but also living, especially from the US side, who have been warning about those issues and about this problem, and saying that this is not sane. There is no reason behind it. And the question of insanity is definitely something that needs to be asked for all the European member states, because it doesn't help if we bail out a country if the homework is not done. And by homework, I mean structural reforms. And as you pointed out at the very beginning, Krassen is the person who should tell us about the structural reforms that can be done and what can be achieved. And just one last sentence, because we saw during the so-called financial crisis, which was nothing else but a sovereign debt crisis in 2008, 2009, or 2007, actually, when it started, when it just appeared, that Greece was the first country to be bailed out. We have a government now, a reform government in Greece, that has done nothing else but structural reforms in the past almost 18 months. And all of a sudden, they have a budget which is in place. They have done a lot of structural reforms, and finally, Greece is back, or is on its way back on track. So there is no reason not to follow what the Austrian School of Economics suggests. It can be achieved and it can be done. And having said that, I think I'll pass over to the next speaker, and there will be plenty of other topics that we can cover.
Excellent. I remember when it comes to all of the excessive public spending, and that the EU called it the Next Generation EU Fund, when you said to me, I think a few weeks ago, that basically they called it like that because the next generation will have to pay for all of it, which was quite shocking for me, because I think you meant people like me. But
those who achieve and work hard and compete.
Okay, well, I will, after Anders, I'll go to Krassen, so that he can explain to us what structural reforms mean from an Austrian standpoint. But I think Anders can also tell us something.
Regions or those local groups do what they can do best in their place, and let the others do other things. And out of that, be competitive with other parts of the world. Because after all, you know, the new G7 or G8 is not France against Britain, against Germany, and against the US and the rest of the world. It's actually, it should be Europe against or in competition with other parts of the world. And this is why we need those 4 freedoms at place in Europe, and subsidiarity principle in order to be most competitive. Sorry for being so long with the short question. But if we could come back, maybe in the next round, we should also think, or maybe Anders could cover that, the new taxes that are being imposed on us at the European level, whether it's the tax on non-recyclable plastic starting from January 1st, 2021, or whether it's the tax on digital services, which will also start on January 21st, and the new one on carbon adjustment mechanism at the EU borders, which will be implemented in January 1st, 2023. And there's also the discussion on the financial transaction tax sooner or later. All those should be European taxes to finance the Next Generation EU fund, which is, you know, not very, which doesn't make much sense. And I don't think that EU taxes will help us get out of the issues that we have right now. So please, Anders, cover that, because I think it's very important that we also discuss it in our European sense.
Yes, Honest, please go ahead and you can talk as long. I just want to say talk as long until Crossen is back, but now he's back. But so you can still talk 2 or 3 minutes, please.
No, but I agree. I think all those ideas about European taxes on taxes from the Brussels level is, of course, all of those taxes are questionable in all respects. But most of all, I think it's questionable that the European Union could have a capacity of imposing taxes on businesses, on people on their own. I think that's the first road that we should turn away from at all, because if we open that door, then we can ask the same question as before: how much money can we print in Europe? If we open that door, we can also ask how much taxes could we put from that level, because it's so far from the most part of Europe. It's far away in Brussels, and the responsibility on the politicians and even on the Commission especially is very far from the voters. So it's the taxes on the European level we should be fighting as hard as possible. Then going into those different tax initiatives, I always think about sort of a business perspective. Here we throw away 800 billion euros, don't really knowing what to do with them, and then we have to find out ways to finance them. And then we say that we, for instance, introduce tech taxes on tech business. And most politicians say we have this, they talk about digitalization as the most important issue for Europe to create more value and better business climate and so on. We should digitalize everything. It's on the agenda for most politicians. And what are then their ideas about how to do that? To introduce tech taxes on those kind of business, on digital businesses. Is that the first way to promote something, to start with a tax on it? I don't think so. And I think actually it's a problem. It's not only a problem in money, because it's also sort of bureaucracy. We already have introduced European tax systems on VAT, on digital service taxes. That's one of I've been hit by that tax myself. And it's not the money, but the regulation. They're trying to find out ways to cope, and they talk about harmonization. In one decision from Brussels, I had to cope with 82 levels of VAT in Europe. And they call that sort of making it easier for businesses. Instead of using my Swedish VAT level when I was selling digital services, I had to use 82 different levels and had to find out which one to use. So I'm afraid not only for the level of the taxes, I'm also very much afraid about how how those taxes are designed. And the history that if you track back in history, it's not a fine history from designing taxes on European level. But I think we should also think about these taxes as, I think it's in some way, it's not only about introducing taxes, it's also they try to blame game. We try to get money from it's our money, or should it be this money from paid in one country or paid in another country? And I think they're moving the problem into the future. So they say, here is the pot of gold at the end of the we can see in the horizon. And they say we have a lot of gold getting from businesses like Amazon and Facebook and so on if they pay taxes in Europe. But actually, it's the same money. There is no more money to tax, actually. And I think a lot of those politicians actually know that, but they try to sell that message to the voters that there is a pot of gold somewhere. But actually, it's the same pot of gold that should be shared between all of us. So that's sort of in some way you could actually, I think you should even call it a scam in some way to solve it.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And with that, I think let's turn to sort of the final round of questions, and we can start with Kristen and then go through Prince Michael, Barbara, and then Anders. Please keep it to like 1 or 2 minutes because we have 5 more minutes. And I think the only reason why I'm the moderator is because I'm German and I always have to stop on time. So kind of after, I know Anders just told us some very depressing things, but when it comes to the future of Euro, Kristen, are you optimistic when you look into the future? What would make you optimistic?
Future of Europe or the euro?
Yeah.
I never expected that the European Union will be such an exemplification of the public choice theory. So what Anders explained, this is one of the explanatory principles of taxation in public choice. You promise to give in order to take, So that's very strange. And I believe, retaining this policy, which is obviously happening as we speak, and with new taxes from the next year, and then the Green Deal and other things, which are in the pipeline. I think this will motivate much more. It is not already Euroscepticism. It is a process which is very similar to Catalonia, which is very similar to anything you would expect, from people who would like to vote by exiting. And it will either increase the deficiency or it will lead to the solution of the union. If the union survives, next 7 years, probably there will be something positive. But for the time being, instead, and this is very, very visible, I think, from Brexit. Basically, so-called Brexiteers, or voters in the United Kingdom, those who are responsible. And in the European Union, we have this whatever strange constellation at the moment. Everybody is blaming the European.
I see opportunities, and I think, as I before was a bit pessimistic about the tech taxes and so on. On the other side, we can always see that new technology and new ways to create business and so on always find a way through new regulations and to create more freedom and value to the users and the customers and some wealth also to the investors. So I'm always optimistic, and I think I actually like European Union as an idea for free trade and so on. So I think I'm optimistic.
Beautiful. So with that, I think we can end it on a perfect note. Thanks all to the panelists for joining. Thanks for the audience for joining us today through this hour. The next session is in 2 hours, 3 p.m. Argentinian time with Marian Tupi. And I hope to see you there because I think it will be great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.